Mercedes can be forgiven a downturn after its supremacy from 2014 to 2021, but a third year in the doldrums in 2024 would mean a temporary blip risks becoming a permanent decline. Finishing third in the championship in 2022, then second last year, is hardly disastrous. But for a team that racked up a combined total of 15 constructors and drivers' titles prior to that, it's a painful slump. That's what makes the Mercedes W15 one of the most important cars in the team's history. Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff vowed after the 2023 season that Mercedes would leave no stone unturned with its new car. The 2023 Mercedes was erratic, struggled in slower corners and with rear stability in quick ones, and every time progress seemed to be made, it would have a bafflingly terrible weekend. Although it was decent in medium-speed corners and looked after its tyres well, it was a package that clearly had too many limitations to ever challenge Red Bull. Wolff has been frank in admitting that the last 2 years of struggles are not good enough. So here are the 6 key things Mercedes must stop getting wrong if it's to do better with its 2024 car. There's only so much that can be changed about an F1 car during a season, meaning the Mercedes W15 needs to have the basics nailed from the start. Only by doing that can it avoid baking in limitations that will hold it back in 2024. These structural decisions will long since have been taken, and as technical director James Allison has confirmed, the monocoque, front and rear suspension and gearbox will be all new designs. That's not unusual for a big team, but it is particularly significant given these were areas that limited the potential of Mercedes last year. Mercedes began to shift its 2024 direction with the major upgrade package introduced at Monaco, which included changes to the front suspension that increased the level of anti-dive. This is a geometry that reduces the amount the front suspension is compressed when the car's weight shifts forward under braking. Wolff claimed during the season that, if not for the cost cap, Mercedes would likely have introduced a new monocoque. That's possible, although with the lead times and costs involved, that would be a massive undertaking even with an unlimited budget. But the new monocoque could allow Mercedes to follow Red Bull in having more of a V-shaped chassis. Red Bull already had such a chassis shape in 2022, but made it more aggressive in 2023. This shape creates more room to increase the mass airflow volume flowing through the crucial Venturi tunnels in the underfloor. This also allows more flexibility in the external bodywork design at the front of the sidepod. It's likely Mercedes will go in a similar direction. The chassis change will also allow the mandatory side impact structures to be repositioned, having been defined originally to accommodate the zero sidepod design that was dropped with the Monaco upgrade. Then comes the rear suspension. It's difficult to make big changes here during the season given the gearbox casing largely defines the geometry. Red Bull modified its gearbox for 2023, adding a structure on the top of it that the front legs of the top wishbones were mounted from, allowing increased anti-squat characteristics. Mercedes cannot afford to get the architecture wrong in 2024. This generation of Formula 1 cars is all about nailing the interaction of the aerodynamic characteristics and the mechanical platform. That's something Red Bull has proved to be supreme at so far. This is what makes the aforementioned changes to the front and rear suspension so important. Improving the platform control was one of the key objectives of the Monaco upgrade last year. As trackside engineering director Andrew Shovlin said at the time, the front suspension changes created not only aerodynamic gains, but also improvements in terms of giving good entry stability and mid-corner front-end grip. But as he pointed out, the team didn't end up with what it wanted because of the compromises of adapting an existing car. The ideas Mercedes had back then will feed into the design of the W15. Allison believes the experience of the past couple of years means Mercedes has learned much about how to get the aero platform and the spring platform to be happier bedfellows, which he characterises as the main challenge of these cars. And remember, it was the suspension that Red Bull design genius Adrian Newey focused on at the start of this regulation cycle. That shows how vital it is. The word concept is bandied around endlessly in F1, but poorly defined. Often, it's applied to the physical look of the car, but with F1 cars today, it's more about the performance windows you want to operate in. The so-called zero sidepod design was often cited as the underlying concept of the Mercedes cars in 2022 and early 23, but as the team kept saying, it wasn't. But Allison talks of conceptual choices in terms of how the car behaves rather than what it looks like. These decisions are what is hoped will banish the capricious characteristics that have dogged Mercedes in the past. As he puts it, what makes the thing work or not work is what will you value, what will bring lap time. Allison describes this as the myriad key decisions that dictate the aerodynamic characteristics. It's not simply about downforce, but where the downforce is, at what ride heights, and how robust should it be in crosswinds, meaning at what speed and angle should that be measured. He describes all of these as the key conceptual choices in terms of what a team places value on over and above the visuals of the car. These decisions will dictate how the wind tunnel testing in particular is conducted, with the ride height sensitivity particularly vital. If the choices made are correct, then it will be down to Mercedes to develop quickly enough along that path to catch Red Bull. As Mercedes made a respectable recovery during 2022, emerging as a race winner late in the season, it chose to carry that car concept into 2023. But there was a curveball in the form of the rule changes introduced to tackle concerns about the physical toll porpoising took on drivers. And Mercedes itself played a key role in changes being made by lobbying hard for action to reduce porpoising and bouncing. The key change was the raising of the floor edge height by 15mm. Allison characterises that as coming quite late in the day, but acknowledges it meant the cars would bounce less. The question was how to respond to that. It was all about whether to cash in the 15mm increase in floor height by lowering the ride height the car was conceived to work at, in the knowledge porpoising would be less of a problem and the resulting downforce could be safely harnessed, or continue with a similar concept. Mercedes chose the latter. The decision was made based on the fact that its performance improved markedly during 2022, effectively tricking the team into thinking it was on the right track. Allison admitted that Mercedes had been too cautious. The car was conceived to run at a higher than ideal ride height. Mercedes modified that approach as 2023 progressed, but the W15 will be the first car fully conceived around that. And this is symptomatic of the aggressive approach Mercedes must take if it's to have any chance of taking on Red Bull. That's something Allison, who is a hugely competitive individual, is driving hard. After returning to the front line as technical director in the middle of the 2023 season, Allison identified a weakness. As a result of the shock of the slump in competitiveness, he characterised the way the team was working as fragmented. He said this was a consequence of the determination, perhaps even desperation, to get back on top, and this is an area that has improved since he returned to action. Getting an F1 design team of hundreds of people to all pull in the same direction is no easy task, but the shift in car concept that began last season and that will be more fully realised in 2024 has helped to pull that together. The big question is whether, if Mercedes doesn't start the season as strongly as hoped, slipping into the same pattern would be avoided. The odds are against Mercedes being able to fight Red Bull for the championship in 2024. It's not impossible, but realistically a good season will be one in which it closes the gap and can be a more regular threat for race wins. What will matter most is the development rate over the season. If Mercedes starts behind but can make faster progress than Red Bull in a car that has big potential, then that could set it up for a title challenge in 2025. There has been a tendency for Mercedes to see strong weekends as the sign of a breakthrough, think Spain 2022 or Austin 23, only to then be set back by a slump. The swings between optimism and disaster have characterised Mercedes over the previous 2 seasons. The team has to accept it's going to be a long way back. What we can be sure of is that the Mercedes W15 will be a very different car to its predecessors, even if the team went somewhere in that direction already in 2023. As Wolff has said, we are completely moving away from how we laid out the chassis and every component has been changed. Mercedes has the resources, the personnel and the potential to hit back at Red Bull. But the key question is whether Mercedes can avoid the mistakes that have held it back for the past 2 years. As Wolff warns, for all the changes, we could get it wrong. But that's something Mercedes really can't afford to do.